Hello there, friends and enemies. Card games by nature are a competitive thing. You play with other people with the intent of winning the game, usually. So when it comes to games like Yu-Gi-Oh, how do we differentiate what competitive and casual play is? Obviously, when we're looking at Yu-Gi-Oh, we can say that competitive Yu-Gi-Oh play is attempting to make a deck that will play the most optimally against all other decks that are being played currently. At least that's the way that I interpret competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, taking a look at the way that competitive players that go to events and go to tournaments make their deck lists. So then that leaves us with casual Yu-Gi-Oh. What exactly entails casual Yu-Gi-Oh? What do I mean when I say that I am a casual Yu-Gi-Oh player? This can be hard to state because casual Yu-Gi-Oh, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily mean that you're playing with specific cards. It just means that you play the game a specific way. In order to show what I mean by this, I need to explain the way that I play Yu-Gi-Oh and why I consider that casual. When building decks for Yu-Gi-Oh, I do not build with the intention of making my deck be the best deck it could possibly be. I build my deck with the intention of making it, one, consistent, and two, play into its gimmick. The two things that get me into a Yu-Gi-Oh archetype are either the art or the mechanics that the deck wants to play around. Usually, decks that have interesting art will have interesting mechanics. In this way, I would argue that my most competitive deck is Sprites, which isn't super competitive, but it keeps me in the loop if I were to play competitive on Master Duel. However, decks that I would normally play are in the range of something like Madolche, which is a deck that I've been playing the longest in my lifetime. I've been playing Madolche for about 12 years now, and I just like it because I like the idea of shuffling things back into your deck consistently. Now, depending on the type of player you are, you hear me talk about Madolche and Sprites, and you go, those I wouldn't necessarily consider casual decks. So let me talk about the way that I like to build decks. We'll get to Madolche and Sprites in a second to talk about how I play those, but I want to start off by exemplifying my favorite deck, Magic-Key. In building my Magic-Key deck, what I wanted to do was I wanted to focus on normal monsters, since that's a thing that Magic-Keys care about. So for the most part, every card in my deck that is not a Magic-Key monster is a normal monster or a card that helps get normal monsters out. I don't care that there's a more optimal way to play Magic-Key, this is the way that I interpret the gimmick. And for the most part, my Magic-Key deck is relatively consistent. It constantly does what I want it to do, which is get into my big extra deck boss monsters. Double this with the fact that Magic-Key alone, as an archetype, just doesn't necessarily do that well against most other decks just because of the way that it works. In that way, I should point out that I don't play Madolches with cards like Herald of the Orange Light because I don't care about making my deck combo fast. I care about it being consistent. And I understand that Herald of the Orange Light can make your deck more consistent if you play it with certain cards. From my understanding, people attempt to play Madolche as like a fairy deck kind of, which I understand. But I play Madolche pure Madolche. I rarely put cards in that aren't Madolche. I think I've got like Mirror Force in it and Dark Bribe maybe? Not Dark Bribe, Infinite Impermanence. But it's not about making Madolches the best they could possibly be. It's more about just being able to consistently do what I want the deck to do, which is get out my Queen Tiramisu. My goal with Madolches is to shuffle cards from your field back into your deck, which not a whole bunch of cards in the archetype do. In fact, I believe Tiramisu is the only card that can pick cards off of the field and put them back into the deck. But I enjoy the way that my Madolche deck plays. It's fun for me. So now that I've explained that, you're probably thinking, so why are you talking about this topic? A while ago, there was price discourse about Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I've already stated my ideas on prices in my prices and proxies video, but we're not going to talk about that now. We're going to talk about a tweet that Head to Head Battles made, where they said that casual Yu-Gi-Oh is cheap, competitive Yu-Gi-Oh is expensive. To a degree, I agree with the sentiment. but I don't think it's for the same reasons. Especially because depending on the type of player that you are, casual can mean a whole different kind of thing. In my mind, casual does not necessarily mean that you don't play with staples. It just means that you play decks in a way that's more so meant to be fun rather than meant to be constantly winning. And by fun, I mean not a deck you would play if you were going to a tournament or something. Probably not something that you would consider to be a good deck. But this doesn't necessarily mean playing without staple cards, correct? I mean, I think that sometimes staple cards are kind of required in decks in order to help make them a little more consistent. If I'm playing an archetype that doesn't have any cards that negate anything, I'm likely going to put cards in my deck that help negate stuff so that I can make my deck be a little more consistent. I will probably put Ash Blossom in a deck like Crystal Beast because Crystal Beast doesn't have a whole bunch of cards that negate effects, and if they do, they aren't good cards. In my Magic-y deck, there's not a whole lot that I really need to put in there, but I did put in Dark Ruler No More because I feel like it helps the deck, even if just a tiny bit. There's probably other stuff I could use in my Magic-y deck that I might put in later. Evenly Matched is always a card to put into a deck if you want to. Now, I want to be clear, I'm obviously not saying that I completely disagree with head-to-head battles. I think I understand where they're coming from with that tweet. I just think that it really depends on the type of person you are. Say that you're a casual player and you really want to play Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes is not that cheap of a deck. Some people might say, oh, Diabella Star is like $20, $25. I don't know how much Diabella Star is. So that makes her cheap. She's not as expensive as other cards, but that's still $60 for a playset. That's not cheap. I've only ever spent more than like $15 on like one deck that I bought in singles, and I would never do it again. It was Plunder Patrol, in case you wanted to know. I really wanted to play Plunder Patrol. I'm a pirate guy. Have you figured that out yet? You have no reason to know that. Don't take that as like condescending. Back to the point. Part of the reason that I'm making this video is because I've seen a lot of people talk about how to distinguish casual Yu-Gi-Oh from competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, and I believe that that's where the line is whether or not you are building your deck optimally for winning or if you're building it for just doing whatever. For people that are on the more competitive side of Yu-Gi-Oh, their casual decks might be something that's just like an experiment, something they just threw together to see if it would work. I would consider a casual deck to be something that's mostly a pure archetype, but that's just because that's the way that I like to play. I could see some people considering a casual deck to just be a pile of cards just pushed together and held with a rubber band. And I could see a ton of people saying that their casual deck is a deck that just doesn't have staple cards or generic boss monsters or something like that. Casual Yu-Gi-Oh is hard to define simply because, as I said in the beginning, card games are competitive by nature. How do you quantify something that's competitive and smush it down into being something that is just for fun, especially when not everyone's idea of fun is the same? I'm sure that there are certain people, if they see this video, that will comment something like, oh, well, fun to me is winning, and so I build my decks to win. And that's great for you if you do that. That's been a lot of the response whenever I talk about how I build decks to have fun. Point being, I love Ursa Arctics, and yes, they are consistent. I'm always able to do what I want with Ursa Arctics. So those are my thoughts on casual Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm not sure if that was necessarily like concise enough. That was really kind of just my stream of consciousness, but I have a feeling that anybody who watches this video might understand what I'm trying to say. I hope so. Let me know your thoughts on how you view casual versus competitive Yu-Gi-Oh down below. And I don't mean like casual versus competitive players, I mean what you consider casual and what you consider competitive. Where do you consider that line to be? Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found something to enjoy about this video, and thank you so much for 600 subscribers. I don't know what to say. That's That's crazy to me. The fact that 600 of you want to watch some guy sitting here that can't complete a thought to save his life and has bad opinions just do these videos is awesome. I hope you're having a great day, and until next time, as always, drink your water.